Iran can close the Strait of Hormuz and bankrupt America in exactly 83 days. Not approximately 83 days, not eventually bankrupt America. Precisely 83 days from closure to complete American economic collapse. While Iran demonstrates that asymmetric economic warfare defeats military superiority through strategic resource control, this is the 83-day countdown to American bankruptcy. And Iran knows America is not ready. Let me show you exactly how Strait of Hormuz closure destroys the American economy in less than 3 months. Let me walk you through the day-by-day breakdown of economic collapse that unfolds mathematically regardless of American military response. And let me explain why Iran can win the ultimate economic war without firing a single shot while America's strategic petroleum reserve runs out on day 83. Because when you understand the oil dependency mathematics, when you see the supply chain vulnerabilities, when you recognize the strategic reserve limitations, you realize Iran holds the economic nuclear weapon that can destroy American civilization through energy starvation. The 83-day bankruptcy is not prediction. The 83-day bankruptcy is mathematical certainty. Every economic warfare campaign in history succeeded through resource control, while military superiority proved irrelevant when essential commodities became unavailable. Germany's U-boat campaign targeted British supply lines rather than military targets. Japan's Pacific strategy focused on resource denial rather than territorial conquest. Iran's strait closure strategy represents economic warfare at unprecedented scale while controlling 40% of global oil transit through geographic choke point that American military cannot keep open during sustained Iranian resistance. The Strategic Petroleum Reserve analysis reveals American vulnerability while 83 days of emergency oil supply provides insufficient buffer for economic survival during extended strait closure that Iran can maintain indefinitely. Strategic Petroleum Reserve current inventory totals 371 million barrels, while American daily oil consumption averages 20.5 million barrels, creating mathematical depletion in 18 days without any crude oil imports. But emergency protocols extend this timeline to 83 days through rationing and reduced consumption that cannot prevent economic collapse. Gasoline production requires continuous crude oil processing, while refinery operations cannot function beyond existing feedstock inventory that typically maintains 15-30-day reserves before complete shutdown occurs. Heating oil reserves for northeastern United States total 47 days of winter consumption, while strait closure during heating season creates immediate energy crisis for 38 million Americans facing potential freezing. Jet fuel reserves support commercial aviation for 26 days, while airline industry shutdown eliminates domestic transportation and cargo movement essential for economic function and supply chain operation. Diesel fuel inventories maintain 22 days of trucking industry consumption, while transportation sector collapse eliminates just-in-time delivery systems that modern American economy depends upon for survival. The oil import dependency mathematics prove Iranian leverage, while American domestic production cannot replace straight.
What is the fate of the petrodollar? A senior Iranian official told CNN that Tehran is considering allowing some vessels to pass through the Strait of Hormuz, with one caveat, that all transactions for cargo, that includes oil, are settled in Chinese yuan and not the US dollar. Such a move would circumvent the decades-old petrodollar used by oil-exporting countries to settle transactions. The petrodollar is a major reason why the US dollar is the world's reserve currency and also helps maintain dominance of the United States by creating more demand for US dollars. The petrodollar system dates back to 1974, when Saudi Arabia agreed to sell its oil in US dollars, helping stabilize the US economy after the Vietnam War and the end of the gold standard. Sanctioned oil producers like Russia, Iran, and until recently Venezuela challenged the petrodollar, opting to use other currencies. Iran's effective closure of the Strait of Hormuz, that normally handles around 20% of global oil and gas supply, has caused what the International Energy Agency says the largest disruption in the history of global oil markets. If Tehran moves forward with this plan, it could further weaponize one of the world's most critical energy choke points, not only militarily, but also financially, experts say. It's caused energy prices worldwide to skyrocket, and we've even seen prices of things like fertilizer, jet fuel, and polymers increase. But a new risk has emerged. Could the world be moving towards a petro-yuan? De-dollarization has been debated for years, with President Trump warning BRICS, the coalition of emerging nations, against abandoning the US dollar. If Iran continues to keep a tight...
If you want to use the Strait of Hormuz, you need to pay us in Chinese yuan, because that is the only currency that we will accept from now on. This is the offer made by the Iranian government to the rest of the world, whoever wishes to use the Strait of Hormuz. Now, on the other hand, the Russian president made a really interesting offer to the US president if he is willing to end this war. And this news is confirmed, by the way. First of all, China is telling Iran to use yuan as its centralized currency. China wants to challenge the US. China wants to end the US dollar might. These are the analysis that we are looking at on the internet, and they are very respectable analysts, by the way. I respect them personally. But I have a simple explanation that makes much more sense in my head, at least. I will share it with you. The Iranian government made this move that they will only accept Chinese yuan to save themselves from sanctions and the after effects. I will explain. When Russia-Ukraine war started, Russia had a lot of assets in Europe, in the US. They all got confiscated after they started that war against Ukraine. The Russian ruble got hit so badly that it took the Russian government some time to stabilize their own currency, yet Russia exports a lot of oil and gas. Now, let's look at Iran. Iranian government is right now under attack by the US and Israel. If the outcome is what US and Israel wants, then there will be no more Iran left. That is crystal clear. But if Iran somehow survives, then Iranian government have to face much worse sanctions than before. And because the Iranian IRGC even is considered as, actually they are labeled as a terrorist organization. So there is no chance of them doing business with Europe or the US. Now imagine in this scenario, you have to accept a payment because these ships are going through that passage, that Strait of Hormuz, and you accepting US dollar, or let's say Britain pound or Australian dollar or anything. Tomorrow, if the war ends, you cannot use these currencies because these countries have already sanctioned you. So a simple explanation over here is that this is a financial strategic move that two countries that will not abide by these sanctions are China or Russia. Now, Russian ruble is very weak compared to the Chinese yuan. Chinese yuan is very stable. That is one of the reasons that Iranian government said that we will only accept these payments, that whichever vessel will pass through the Strait of Hormuz, they have to pay a tax to the Iranian government. Now, this is not because of the war. This is how it's been happening all the time. We will only accept it in Chinese yuan. So if tomorrow the war ends, we can still use that currency for our benefit. This is my analysis. Now, let's go back to the second news. The Russian president, during his phone call with the US president, gave a really interesting offer to the US president, which he denied, by the way, that if he's willing to end this war, then Russia will transfer the enriched 200 kgs enriched uranium from Iran to Russia, which the US President Donald Trump denied. Now, this news is now being confirmed. Also, the US President said that Russia is helping Iran somehow because they think that we helped Ukraine, so they have to help.
What we see here is Donald Trump acting, as he always does, as a global chaos generator.
There is no imminent threat. There's no imminent threat. I heard President Trump say yesterday Iran was 2 weeks away from a nuclear bomb, and that's simply untrue. It's wrong. It's false. While I'm delighted to see the death of a dictator who's killed tens of thousands of his own people, and I'm glad to see Iranian missiles shot out of the sky, and I don't think that's being dragged in. I think that's the right course of action. This didn't need to happen, and it has a big opportunity cost for our other responsibilities around the world.
The question asked whether we're being dragged into a war with no clear outcomes. We're also being dragged into a war with no clear objectives. We've seen Trump say it's regime change. Oh, no, it's not regime change. It's because of the nuclear weapons. Oh, I wiped those out in June. There are no nuclear weapons. Oh, it's because of an imminent threat. No evidence whatsoever of an imminent threat. The real reason for this attack is spectacle. That's what Trump trades in. That's what he loves. He wants to be the center of attention. He wants to be making global headlines. What we see here is Donald Trump acting.
There are some countries that greatly disappointed me. And, you know, I'm the one that got them to pay from 2% to 5% of GDP, NATO. And I get along great with those countries in NATO, but I always said, you know, the problem with NATO is we'll always be there for them, but they'll never be there for us. And when I hear the UK, which we sort of considered the Rolls-Royce of allies, right? When you say they were the oldest and they were going to be there, and I say it would be really helpful if you'd send over a couple of ships, and if you have some minesweepers, which they do, it'd be very helpful. And the Prime Minister's a nice man. I think he's a very nice guy. He says, well, I'd like to ask my team. I said, you don't have to worry about a team. You don't have a team. You're the Prime Minister. You can make a decision. Well, I have to speak to my people. I said, you don't have to speak to anybody. So it's very disappointing. And then after we obliterated them and destroyed their military, the whole thing, and it became a much safer zone, he said, we're going to send over 2 aircraft carriers. I said, I don't want them anymore. I don't want them after we win. I want them before we start.
Breaking news. Oh my God, Iran is turning the war into a game once more. They've issued another offer. For a ship to pass through the Straits of Hormuz, they must start trading with the Chinese yuan and abandon the United States dollars. You won't believe this. And it's turning out that this particular corridor has significantly affected the global market since Iran declared the closure of it. You've literally seen how the prices of oil has highly spiked, and now they've given a limited offer. If you will trade with the Chinese yuan, then you will freely pass through the Straits of Hormuz. What do you think? How will the United States respond on this? Because here we are talking of the United States dollar crumble. Keep watching, I'll keep you updated. And you've literally...
Row, row, row your boat gently down. Merrily, 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 merrily.
Row, row your boat gently down the stream. Row, row your boat gently down.
Come on, stop. I know how it feel to wake up, fucked up, pockets broke as hell of another rock. Why nobody helps me to open Hormuz?
Iran is going after the US dollar as Iran is now considering allowing a limited number of tankers to pass through the Strait of Hormuz only if the oil is paid for in Chinese yuan. This is by far the greatest threat to the US dollar since World War II, and if enforced will wipe out $1 trillion worth of annual demand for US dollar, which is the value of the oil and liquid natural gas that passes through the Strait of Hormuz. And in order to maintain the status of the US dollar as the world's reserve currency, you will need the rest of the world, other countries, to also want to get and hold US dollar. And the world is incentivized to hold US dollar because right now the world's energy, aka oil, is priced in US dollars, aka the petrodollar. But now if you cannot use US dollar to get your oil through the Strait of Hormuz, demand for the dollar will fall and demand for the Chinese yuan will rise, which will diminish the power of the US dollar, which means the US will no longer be able to do things like sanction other countries. And not to mention, if the Gulf states also start asking for Chinese yuan over US dollar, then